The shattering of glass pierced the silence of our living room. A framed photo lay smashed on the hardwood floor, the shards of glass glinting like tiny daggers. My hands trembled as I stared at the intruder standing before me, a woman clutching the hand of a young boy, his eyes wide with confusion. Richard, my husband of 23 years, stepped forward, his face ashen. "Dana, this is Jenna, and Lucas. They're my family, too." The words hung in the air, a suffocating weight pressing against my chest. I opened my mouth, but no sound escaped. How could this be happening? My perfect life, the life I had fought so hard to build, was crumbling before my eyes. "You have another family?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. "How could you do this to us?" Richard's gaze dropped to the floor, unable to meet mine. "I'm sorry, Dana. I never meant for it to go this far." Jenna shifted uncomfortably, her grip on Lucas tightening. "Richard told me you knew about us. He said you were okay with the arrangement." My heart pounded in my ears as I struggled to comprehend the depth of his deception. Anger surged through me, burning away the shock. "You lied to her, too? You're a coward, Richard, a coward and a liar!" Amelia, our 22-year-old daughter, emerged from her bedroom, her eyes wide with confusion. "Mom, what's going on?" Before I could respond, Richard stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Amelia, honey, I have something to tell you." "Save it," I snapped, my voice trembling with rage. "You've done enough damage. Get out of our house, Richard. Get out and never come back." Amelia's brow furrowed, and she looked from me to Richard, her gaze finally settling on Jenna and the child. Understanding dawned on her face, and her expression hardened. "You sick bastard," she spat, her words dripping with venom. Richard flinched as if struck. "Amelia, please, let me explain." "No," I shouted, my voice raw. "You don't get to explain anything. You've been living a lie, and now the truth is out. You made your choices, Richard, and now you have to face the consequences." Jenna's grip on Lucas loosened, and she took a tentative step forward. "Dana, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Just go. Take your son and get out of my house. I don't want to see either of you ever again." Tears welled in Jenna's eyes, but she nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. She turned and fled, Lucas trailing behind her, casting one last bewildered glance over his shoulder. Richard stood motionless, his face a mask of anguish. "Dana, please, we can work through this. I love you." I shook my head, my heart shattering with each word. "No, Richard, you lost the right to love me the moment you betrayed our family. Our marriage is over." As the weight of my words settled over us, a heavy silence descended. In that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The life I had known, the love I had cherished, was gone, shattered like the broken frame on the floor. The weeks following Richard's departure were a blur. Amelia and I existed in a state of numb disbelief, the weight of his betrayal suffocating us with each passing day. We tried to resume our normal routines, but the empty spaces he left behind served as constant reminders of the life we had lost. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, staring vacantly at a stack of unpaid bills, Amelia emerged from her room, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice quivering with barely contained anger. I looked up, my heart sinking at the expression on her face. "What is it, honey?" Amelia tossed a thick manila envelope onto the table, scattering the bills. "I found this in Dad's office. It's everything. Bank statements, credit card receipts, proof of his double life." I reached for the envelope with trembling hands, dread coiling in my stomach. As I rifled through the contents, a sickening realization dawned on me. Richard hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been embezzling from his company, siphoning funds to support his secret family. "That bastard," Amelia spat, her fists clenched at her sides. "He's been lying to us for years, Mom. He's been stealing, cheating, and God knows what else." I felt bile rise in my throat as the full extent of Richard's deception became clear. "How could he do this to us?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Amelia's expression hardened, her eyes blazing with determination. "He's going to pay for this, Mom. We're going to make sure he pays." I stared at her, uncertainty gnawing at me. "What are you saying, Amelia?" She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "I'm saying we expose him for the lying, thieving scumbag he is. We take all this evidence to his company, to the police. We burn his life to the ground, just like he did to ours." A part of me recoiled at the thought of such vengeance, but another, darker part couldn't deny the appeal of seeing Richard suffer the consequences of his actions. "What about Jenna and the kid?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They're caught up in this, too." Amelia's expression softened, just for a moment. "We'll reach out to Jenna. Maybe she'll see reason and help us take him down." I nodded slowly, my mind whirling with 1,000 different thoughts and emotions. "Okay," I said finally, my resolve hardening. "We'll do it. We'll make him pay for what he's done." Amelia's grim smile sent a shiver down my spine. "Good. It's time we showed that lying piece of garbage what happens when you mess with the Whitaker women." As she turned and stalked back to her room, I couldn't help but wonder if we were embarking on a path we might one day regret. But in that moment, all I could feel was a burning desire for retribution. A need to see Richard suffer as we had suffered, to make him pay for the lies that had shattered our lives. In the days that followed, I found myself standing at a crossroads, torn between the desire for vengeance and the fear of diving headlong into a path of destruction. As I pored over the evidence Amelia had uncovered, the weight of Richard's betrayal threatened to crush me. Amelia, however, remained resolute, her determination unwavering. "We can't let him get away with this, Mom," she insisted, her voice laced with urgency. "He needs to face the consequences of his actions." I nodded numbly, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. A part of me longed to see Richard suffer, to watch as his carefully constructed facade crumbled around him. But another part, the part that still clung to the remnants of the love I once felt, recoiled at the thought of such vindictiveness. "What if we go too far?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if we become the monsters we're trying to destroy?" Amelia's expression softened, and she reached across the table to grip my hand. "Mom, we're not the ones who created this mess. We're just fighting to reclaim what's ours, our dignity, our self-respect. Richard is the one who chose to lie and cheat. He's the monster here." Her words resonated deep within me, igniting a spark of determination that had been flickering dangerously close to extinguishment. She was right. Richard had brought this upon himself, and it was time he faced the music. "You're right," I said, squeezing her hand. "We can't let him get away with this. We need to take him down, once and for all." Amelia's eyes gleamed with a mixture of relief and anticipation. "Good, then let's get to work." Over the next few days, we pored over the evidence, meticulously piecing together a timeline of Richard's deceit. Bank statements, credit card receipts, and damning emails painted a picture of a man consumed by greed and selfishness, willing to sacrifice everything, including his family, for his own desires. As we worked, I could feel the anger simmering within me, a slow burn that threatened to consume me if left unchecked. Each new revelation, each fresh betrayal, stoked the flames of my fury until I could barely contain the rage that coursed through my veins. Finally, we had everything we needed, a damning dossier of Richard's misdeeds, a veritable mountain of evidence that would bury him beneath the weight of his own lies. "It's time," Amelia said, her voice steely with determination. "Time to make that bastard pay." I nodded, my jaw clenched tight. Yes, it's time to end this, once and for all. As we stood there, united in our quest for retribution, I knew there was no turning back. Richard had made his choices, and now he would face the consequences, no matter how steep the price. With our dossier of evidence against Richard firmly in hand, Amelia and I knew it was time to take action. We couldn't move forward alone, not if we wanted to ensure Richard faced the full weight of his crimes. "We need help," Amelia said grimly, her fingers drumming against the tabletop. "Legal help." I nodded, my stomach churning with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. "You're right. We'll need an attorney, someone who can navigate the legal system and make sure Richard can't wriggle his way out of this." Amelia's eyes narrowed, her jaw set in a hard line. "I know just the person." A few days later, we found ourselves seated across from Samantha Kendrick, a no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for taking on high-profile cases. As we laid out the evidence before her, her expression remained inscrutable, betraying none of the shock or disgust we had expected. "This is quite a dossier," she said at last, her voice calm and measured. "If even half of these allegations are true, your husband is in deep trouble." Amelia leaned forward, her eyes blazing with intensity. Every single word is true, Miss Kendrick. That lying, cheating scumbag has been deceiving us for years, stealing from his company to fund his double life. Samantha held up a hand, silencing Amelia's outburst. I believe you, Miss Whitaker. But belief alone won't be enough to convict your husband. We'll need concrete evidence, a paper trail that leaves no doubt as to his guilt. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. We understand. What do you need from us? Over the next few weeks, Samantha guided us through the process of collecting additional evidence, ensuring that every I was dotted and every T was crossed. Her meticulous attention to detail was both reassuring and unsettling, a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation we found ourselves in. As our case against Richard grew stronger, Amelia and I faced another hurdle, the question of what to do about Jenna and her son, Lucas. They were collateral damage in Richard's web of lies, innocent victims caught up in his selfish scheme. We should reach out to her, Amelia said one evening, her voice laced with a surprising note of compassion. She might be willing to help us, especially if it means protecting Lucas. I hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. What if she's loyal to Richard? What if she refuses to cooperate? Amelia's expression hardened. Then we'll have to find another way. But we owe it to ourselves and to her to at least try. In the end, Jenna proved to be an unexpected ally, her anger and hurt at Richard's deception eclipsing any lingering loyalty she might have felt. She provided us with a wealth of information, corroborating our evidence and filling in the gaps in Richard's carefully constructed lies. As the final pieces fell into place, a sense of grim determination settled over us. We had done everything in our power to ensure that Richard would face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful or devastating they might be. It's time, Samantha said, her voice quiet but resolute. Time to bring him down. Amelia and I exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between us. There was no turning back now. The wheels of justice had been set in motion, and Richard's world was about to come crashing down around him. As the days ticked by, a sense of foreboding settled over our household. Despite our meticulous preparations, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. What if Richard somehow managed to evade justice? What if, after everything we'd been through, he still found a way to escape the consequences of his actions? Amelia, ever the voice of reason, brushed aside my concerns with a wave of her hand. He's not getting away this time, Mom. We've got him dead to rights. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. It was as if a storm was brewing on the horizon, and we were caught in its inexorable path. My fears were confirmed one evening when Samantha called, her usually unflappable demeanor replaced by a sense of urgency. We may have a problem, she said without preamble. I've received word that your husband is planning to flee the country. The news hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing the breath from my lungs. What? When? How? Samantha's voice was grim. From what my sources tell me, he's been liquidating assets and making arrangements to leave the country within the next few days. He's taking Jenna and the boy with him. Anger surged through me, hot and pulsing. The coward was running, trying to escape the consequences of his actions just as we were closing in. That lying, spineless bastard, Amelia snarled, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. He's not getting away that easily. I drew in a shaky breath, forcing myself to remain calm. What do we do, Samantha? How do we stop him? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost picture Samantha weighing her options. We move forward with our plan, but we do it now, before he has a chance to disappear. We confront him, hit him with everything we've got, the evidence, the charges, all of it. We take away his ability to run. Amelia nodded, her jaw set in a hard line. Let's do it. I'll call Jenna, make sure she's on board. As I hung up the phone, a sense of determination washed over me. We were so close, so tantalizingly close to seeing Richard face the consequences of his actions. I couldn't, let him wriggle free, not after everything he'd put us through. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as we finalized our plans. Jenna, her loyalty to Richard long since evaporated, agreed to testify against him, providing a damning first-hand account of his deception and manipulation. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. As we made our way to Richard's office, the weight of the moment pressed down upon us like a physical force. This was it. the culmination of weeks of planning, of pain and anger, and a burning desire for justice. Samantha squeezed my arm reassuringly. "It's going to be okay," she murmured. "We've got this." I nodded, forcing a tight smile. "I know. It's time for Richard to face the music." As we stepped into the building, I could feel the storm gathering around us, the winds of change whipping at our backs. There was no turning back now. The only way out was through, and I was determined to see this through to the bitter end, no matter the cost. The tension in the air was palpable as we strode into Richard's office, our footsteps echoing like thunderclaps in the hushed stillness. Samantha took the lead, her shoulders squared and her gaze unwavering, while Amelia and I flanked her on either side, our faces set in grim determination. Richard looked up from his desk, his expression morphing from surprise to confusion to outright panic as he registered our presence. "Dana? Amelia? What's going on?" Before he could say another word, Samantha stepped forward, brandishing a thick manila envelope. "Richard Whittaker, you're under investigation for embezzlement, fraud, and adultery." The color drained from Richard's face as the weight of Samantha's words sank in. "What? That's absurd. You can't possibly believe these ridiculous accusations." Amelia's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Cut the crap, Dad. We know everything. The lies, the cheating, the secret family. It's all over." Richard's eyes darted back and forth, his mind clearly racing to concoct some new web of deception. "Jenna told you, didn't she? That lying little bee?" "Don't you dare!" I cut him off, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Don't you dare try to pin this on Jenna or anyone else. This is your doing, Richard. Your lies, your betrayal." Samantha stepped forward again, her expression impassive. "We have irrefutable evidence of your misdeeds, Mr. Whittaker. Bank statements, financial records, eyewitness testimony, all of it points to a pattern of embezzlement and fraud stretching back years." Richard's face contorted in a snarl of rage. "You think you can take me down with some flimsy evidence and trumped-up charges? I'll bury you all in lawsuits, you hear me? This isn't over, not by a long shot." Amelia's laughter was cold and derisive. "Keep telling yourself that, Dad. Your days of lying and cheating are over. You're finished." As if on cue, the door to Richard's office burst open, and a trio of stern-faced security guards entered, flanked by 2 police officers. "Richard Whittaker, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The world seemed to slow as the officers approached, their movements deliberate and inexorable. Richard's mask of bravado crumbled, his eyes widening in panic as the gravity of the situation finally sank in. "No, wait, you don't understand," he sputtered, his hands raised in a futile gesture of surrender. "This is all a mistake. Dana, please, you have to believe me." But his pleas fell on deaf ears as the officers seized him, roughly spinning him around and snapping the handcuffs into place. As they led him away, his gaze met mine, and for a fleeting moment I saw a glimmer of the man I had once loved, the man who had promised to cherish and protect me, the man who had sworn to love me until the end of time. Then the moment passed, and all I saw was a stranger, a man consumed by greed and selfishness, a man who had sacrificed everything for his own twisted desires. And in that instant, I knew that the Richard what had loved was gone, lost forever in the tangled web of his own lies. As the door swung shut behind him, a profound silence descended upon the room, broken only by the faint sound of Amelia's ragged breathing. We had done it. We had brought Richard Whittaker to his knees, exposed his lies for the world to see. But even as a sense of grim satisfaction washed over me, I couldn't help but wonder if the price we had paid was too high. Had our quest for vengeance cost us more than we could ever hope to regain? Only time would tell. In the aftermath of Richard's arrest, a surreal calm settled over our lives. After the whirlwind of emotions and the relentless pursuit of justice, the sudden stillness felt almost suffocating. Amelia and I sat in silence, staring at the now empty space where Richard's presence had once loomed large. It was as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders, but in its place lingered a hollow ache, the echoes of a life we had once known, now forever altered. "Do you think it was worth it?" Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I considered her question, turning it over in my mind like a puzzle with no clear solution. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Part of me feels like we did the right thing, that he got what he deserved, but another part..." My voice trailed off, the words catching in my throat. Amelia nodded, her expression somber. Yeah, I know what you mean. In the days that followed, we learned the full extent of Richard's betrayal. The embezzlement charges alone were staggering, with evidence suggesting he had siphoned off hundreds of thousands of dollars from his company over the years. But it was the personal revelations that cut deepest. The secret bank accounts, the hidden assets, the paper trail of lies that stretched back nearly a decade. Jenna, it seemed, had been just one in a long line of mistresses, a mere footnote in Richard's sordid chronicle of infidelity. And poor Lucas, that innocent child caught in the crossfire of his father's selfish actions, was left to pick up the pieces of a life he had never asked for. As the media frenzy swirled around us, Amelia and I retreated into ourselves, seeking solace in the quiet moments away from the prying eyes and endless questions. We had sacrificed so much in our pursuit of vengeance, and now that the dust had settled, we were left to confront the consequences of our choices. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jenna standing on the doorstep, her eyes rimmed with tears. "Dana," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." I blinked, taken aback by her unexpected gratitude. "Jenna, I don't know what to say." She shook her head, a sad smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You gave me the strength to break free, to see Richard for the monster he truly is. I'll never be able to repay that debt." As she turned to leave, I found my voice once more. "Jenna, wait." She paused, her eyes questioning. "What will you do now?" I asked. "With Lucas, I mean?" Jenna's expression hardened, a steely resolve settling over her features. "I'll raise him to be a better man than his father, to know the value of honesty, loyalty, and integrity. Richard may have given him life, but I'll make sure he never inherits his father's sins." With those words, she was gone, disappearing into the gathering dusk as abruptly as she had arrived. As I watched her retreating figure, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope amidst the lingering sadness and regret. Perhaps in the end our quest for vengeance had achieved something greater than mere retribution. Perhaps, by exposing Richard's lies and holding him accountable, we had created a ripple effect, a chance for others like Jenna and Lucas to break free from the chains of his deception and forge a better path forward. As the last rays of sunlight faded, casting long shadows across the room, I realized that our journey was far from over. The road ahead would be long and arduous, paved with difficult choices and painful realizations. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to believe that we might just make it through. Battered and bruised, perhaps, but stronger for having weathered the storm. The weeks following Richard's arrest were a whirlwind of chaos and change. As the legal proceedings ground on, Amelia and I found ourselves thrust into the harsh glare of the media spotlight, our private lives suddenly laid bare for the world to dissect and analyze. Through it all, we clung to each other, a united front against the storm of scrutiny and judgment that seemed to rage endlessly around us. Samantha, our steadfast ally, guided us through the legal quagmire, her unwavering presence a constant source of strength and support. "It won't be easy," she warned us, her expression grave. "Richard's lawyers will fight tooth and nail to discredit you, to paint you as vindictive and irrational. You need to be prepared for that." Amelia's jaw clenched, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "Let them try. We have the truth on our side, and that's all that matters." As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the weight of our decision began to take its toll. The sleepless nights, the endless questioning, the constant reminder of the life we had lost, it all threatened to crush us beneath its unbearable weight. But through it all, we persevered, buoyed by an unshakable belief that we had done the right thing. Richard's web of lies had been unraveled, his carefully constructed facade torn down brick by brick. He would face the consequences of his actions, no matter how long or arduous the road ahead might be. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the day of reckoning arrived. Richard, his once confident demeanor replaced by a pallid, haunted expression, stood before the judge, his fate hanging in the balance. As the charges were read aloud, embezzlement, fraud, adultery, A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the most seasoned journalists and legal experts seemed taken aback by the sheer magnitude of his misdeeds. Amelia and I sat in the front row, our hands clasped together in a silent show of solidarity. Jenna was there too, her eyes fixed on Richard with a mixture of anger and pity. When the verdict was finally announced, guilty on all counts, a collective gasp rippled through the room. Richard's shoulders slumped, his head bowing in defeat as the weight of his sins finally came crashing down upon him. In the aftermath, as the media circus swirled around us once more, Amelia and I found ourselves clinging to each other, tears of relief and sorrow mingling on our cheeks. "It's over," Amelia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's finally over." I nodded, my throat constricted by a torrent of conflicting emotions. The road ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. In the days and weeks that followed, we began to piece our lives back together, one fragile step at a time. Jenna, her custody of Lucas secured, reached out to us, and an unlikely bond of understanding began to form. We were survivors, united by the scars of Richard's betrayal, but determined to forge a new path forward. As for Richard, his fate was sealed. A lengthy prison sentence, his once promising future reduced to a mere footnote in the annals of his own hubris and greed. But even as the world around us moved on, the echoes of our ordeal lingered, a constant reminder of the price we had paid for justice. The road to healing would be long and arduous, paved with difficult choices and painful realizations. Yet as I stood on the precipice of this new chapter, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope, a belief that, no matter how dark the night might seem, the dawn would eventually break, ushering in a new era of peace and redemption. For in the end, that was the true legacy of our quest for vengeance. Not the destruction of one man, but the reclamation of our own strength, our own resilience, our own indomitable spirit. And as the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the room, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united in our determination to forge a brighter future, one built on the ashes of the past, but rising ever higher toward the promise of a new dawn.
You got your best friend pregnant. I wonder what he's talking about. A sense of detachment, as though it's someone else's problem, wells up inside me. But the reality hits me with the words Ella utters right in front of me. Well, that's the situation. So you're going to divorce Harry, right? Yvonne can't believe it. Pregnant with Ella. When I ask back, Ella smirks and continues with a mocking look. You figured it out, right? I'm taking your husband. So get out, gladly I reply, with a smile. Ella is really clueless. Does she think I knew nothing? Of course, that's not the case. I've known about their affair for quite a while. I just didn't confront them until I was ready. But now this saves me the trouble. They've basically confessed to cheating on me, so I'll return the affair with interest. Brace yourselves, smiling, I head to the front door. My name is Yvonne Kirby. I'm a 34-year-old housewife working part-time. I head to the front door. At a supermarket, my husband Harry works at a car dealership for a well-known manufacturer. I think his salary is decent, but that doesn't mean we're rolling in dough. He needs to look sharp for work, and our daughter Elsie wants to attend a private middle school. She's just started 4th grade but will need more money for her exams. That's why I work part-time, to help out with finances. Ideally, I'd work full-time, but it's not that simple. The first issue is taking care of my mother-in-law. She lives alone, has mobility issues, and is elderly. She gets a pension, but my care and support are essential. The only silver lining is the house my late father-in-law built nearby. She lives there alone, having refused to move in with us to stay in her house full of memories. The second issue is Harry's job. He's always busy, leaving all the household chores to me. If I worked full-time, the housework would just pile up. Staying the course is the most realistic option, isn't it? I just can't take that final step. That's my current situation. But I knew from before we got married that I would be doing the household chores alone and that my mother-in-law would need care. So I'm not unhappy with how things are. But there's one thing I regret, becoming friends with Ella, who introduced me to Harry. Ella and I met in college. Back then, I was pretty plain. Ella, on the other hand, was popular and quite noticeable. Sure, Ella looked good and had a likable personality, but that was just a facade. The real Ella was the worst, however. I often hung out with Ella. I didn't realize this until much later. Unaware, I often hung out with Ella. Ivone, you got something on your mind. Ella would pat my shoulder lightly. I answered a bit shyly, I'm stuck on a report due next week. Is that all? I'm here for you. Let's work on it together. But hanging out with someone plain like me, won't people start looking at you funny? Ella. I glanced around and felt the weight of people's stares, their curiosity evident as to why Ella was in the company of someone as unremarkable as me. I turned away. What are you talking about? You and I have been best friends since we enrolled. Ella's words caused a stir around us. She cast a stern look at the onlookers. What, is it weird that Aone and I are best friends? I noticed a student shaking their head with a wry smile. Witnessing this, Ella drew me close and declared, we're total opposites, but we're best friends. Everyone, be nice to Aone, all right? Got it, I heard someone say slowly. I began to be accepted, all thanks to Ella's scheme. Ella frequently employed the phrase, I'll do it for you, whether it was, I'll hang out with you, or I'll wait for you. It subtly implied that my abilities were only viable because of her, insinuating my own naivety. Consequently, I started to believe that I could only accomplish things with Ella's assistance, attributing all success to her. In retrospect, it was a fallacy. I had been led to believe I wasn't competent enough. Unaware of this manipulation, I spent my college years overly reliant on Ella. Thus, when Ella requested a favor, I readily acquiesced. You're taking the car dealership's recruitment interview. I had my eye on that place too. Can you give it up for me? Ella implored. But I began to protest. Come on, Aone. We're friends, aren't we? Constantly comparing myself to Ella, I always felt inferior. Despite having similar grades, she excelled in personality and appearance. I felt I stood no chance if we both pursued the same opportunities. These insecurities made me yield easily. Then maybe I'll go for banking, I conceded. That's a good idea. You're more suited to be a hard-working bank employee, Aone, Ella affirmed. Ultimately, Ella secured the job at the car dealership, and I settled for a position in a bank. At the time, I didn't perceive it as part of Ella's plan, rather, I deemed myself fortunate to have obtained a stable job by sacrificing the dealership position for her. Shortly after, Ella approached me with a proposition. I've got someone I want to introduce you to, Aone. Harry is my coworker. I think he's perfect for you. Why not give it a try? I'm sure about it. Let's meet him. Trusting Ella's judgment implicitly, I agreed. Following her introduction, I met Harry. We began dating, and during one of our outings, Harry confided, Ivone, you're such a good person. I'd like to marry someone like you. Me? I asked, taken aback. But I can't ask you to marry me, Harry sighed. Curious, I inquired about his reservations, prompting Harry to disclose his familial obligations. His mother's mobility issues meant that his future spouse would need to assume caregiving responsibilities. This uncertainty clouded his decision to marry. It's okay. I don't mind at all. I'm occupied with work, and you'd handle the household chores. Are you sure? I reassured him. Yes, I'm sure. Leave it to me. Genuinely in love with Harry, I saw no issue with his circumstances. Thus, I agreed to marry him. However, my trust was soon shattered. Years into our marriage, while picking up Elsie from kindergarten, Daisy, usually a jovial fellow mom, approached me with a solemn expression. "Hey, can we talk for a bit?" "Do you have time now?" she asked. "Sure, I'm off from work today, so I have a bit of time." Between housework and caring for my mother-in-law, engaging with other moms is important as Elsie's mother, so I followed Daisy to a nearby cafe, as she suggested. Once we ordered, Daisy began to talk. "You see, I saw something." Our kids started eating their cakes, and Daisy shared her story. She had been going to a gym near the station for her diet. A few days ago, she saw Harry there. Daisy had met Harry at the kindergarten before, so she recognized him right away. But that's where the problem started. Harry was with an unknown woman, looking quite intimate. Daisy asked me with a stern face, "Isn't that cheating?" "Cheating? No way, that can't be," I replied, trying to hide my agitation. Daisy put her hand on mine as I gripped my cup tightly. "Why don't we check it out secretly? If it's cheating, we might get some evidence." The idea of checking scared me, but I couldn't just ignore the possibility of infidelity. After some thought, I agreed to accompany Daisy to the gym. On the day, I left Elsie with my mother-in-law and met Daisy in the neighborhood. We headed to the gym together. We entered the gym as trial members. Soon, Harry arrived at the gym, but he was alone. No woman, no colleagues, no friends. Daisy's just jumping to conclusions, I thought, relieved. Then a familiar voice caught my attention. "Sorry, I got a bit delayed." That voice, it's Ella. My heart skipped a beat. "What were you up to?" "Had a troublesome customer kept making a fuss." Their cheerful conversation continued. Watching them, my heart ached. Feeling betrayed was the strongest emotion, followed by the shock that Ella, who was supposed to be my best friend, was involved. "I took some photos. Is it okay?" Daisy's voice brought me back. I nodded, but honestly, I was far from okay. My mind went blank. I don't remember much after that. According to Daisy, who filled me in later, the two left the gym and went to Ella's place. Apparently, I followed them with Daisy and even took photos of them entering the room. I don't remember it, but the evidence was clearly on my phone. With the evidence, it'd be better to divorce, Daisy advised me. But rushing into a divorce wasn't wise. Elsie is young, and I couldn't live on my part-time job alone. Just a little patience, just a bit more, and then I'll divorce him. From that day, I had a new goal in my life, to stabilize my living situation and secure a steady income to save up little by little, so I'd be ready for a divorce whenever it came. I focused on these two things, yet my heart wasn't calm. Every time Harry came home with a nonchalant face, I felt boiling anger inside. But somewhere in my heart, I still wanted to believe in Harry. So occasionally, I asked him things like this: "Harry, why don't you take Elsie out sometime?" "I can't do that, you know. Being at the car dealership, my busiest times are when everyone else is off." He seemed like he didn't want to deal with our daughter. Child rearing was my job, like he was saying that. I just nodded, "Okay, I see. How about visiting your mom on your days off?" "I don't really have anything to talk about with my mom." "But you can't even take care of her. Usually, taking care of her is your job." "Not mine. She's not a kid, so I'll stay out of it." Harry's tone grew stern, seemingly irritated. I closed my mouth, feeling dejected. It seemed like Harry had lost his affection, not just for me but for Elsie and my mother-in-law as well. I felt disappointed, yet somewhere relieved, believed no more attachments. Those words floated in my mind. The following years were truly hellish. Living with Harry was just cohabitation. We barely spoke, and our interactions were minimal. Plus, as Elsie grew older, she started to despise Harry. "I don't even need a dad like him," she would say things like that. One day, Harry had to go to the manufacturer's headquarters for work. Perfect timing, I thought, and headed to my mother-in-law's house with Elsie. During Harry's business trip, Elsie and I stayed at her grandmother's house. But the next day, I got a strange call from Harry, who was supposed to be away. "You're not home." "Where are you?" he asked abruptly. "I'm at your mom's." "What about your business trip?" I inquired. "Just get back home right now," he said bluntly, then hung up. Puzzled, I headed home. Entering the house, I heard the TV in the living room. "Harry, did something happen on your trip?" I asked as I opened the living room door. At that moment, I saw Harry talking with Ella. But as soon as he noticed me, Harry pulled away from her, then he got down on his knees. "I got your best friend pregnant," he blurted out. What is he talking about? I thought, feeling detached, like it was someone else's issue. But reality struck with the words Ella blurted out right in front of me. "Well, that's how it is." "So, you're going to divorce Harry, right, Yvonne? You're pregnant." Ella, my best friend, smirked and continued with a mocking look, "You figured it out, right? I'm taking your husband, so get out." Gladly, I replied with a smile and turned on my heel. Ella really is clueless, does she think I knew nothing about it? Of course, that's not true. I've known about you two for quite some time. I just didn't confront you until I was ready. But now you've made it easier for me by confessing to your affair. Well then, prepare yourselves because I'm going to return everything you've done to me with interest, I said to myself, smiling as I headed for the front door. Harry yelled as if trying to stop me, "You realize talking about divorce, right? Are you sure you understand that?" "I understand perfectly. You think you can make it on just your part-time income after we divorce?" Harry sneered. I sighed, then Harry, in his arrogant manner, offered, "If you're really desperate, I might hire you to take care of my mom. That suits you perfectly, taking care of the elderly." Harry and Ella burst into laughter. Seeing them, I sighed again. "Ella, you finally showed your true colors, huh?" "What are you talking about?" Ella feigned ignorance. I snorted and continued, pretending to be my friend, introducing me to Harry. "It was all just to use me conveniently, wasn't it?" "Oh, you knew," boring Ella pouted. "Yes, I realized your true nature when I found out about your affair with Harry." I showed them the evidence, photos of their affair. "What the heck is that?" Ella rushed over and stared at the phone screen. When she realized the photos were of them, she glared at me sharply. "How long have you known?" "What, about 5 years. Don't joke with me." Ella raised her voice. I answered calmly, I was preparing for life after the divorce. I thought I'd be told I couldn't make it on my part-time income. I smiled at Harry, as if saying, just as I expected. Harry seemed infuriated by my attitude and suddenly started making a scene. "Well then, get out as soon as you can. I'll send your stuff wherever you want." "No need for that, most of my things are already at your mom's place." "What? At my mom's?" Harry's face changed color. I continued, trying to suppress a laugh. "Didn't you notice that your wife's and family's belongings have been gradually disappearing?" That's pathetic, in more ways than one," I snorted. Harry, clearly agitated, raised his voice. "Enough, then. There's no more to talk about. I'll be claiming alimony later. I'll give you the divorce papers. Then do whatever you want. Just be prepared, the cost of cheating isn't cheap." I looked back and forth between Harry and Ella, then left the house, heading straight to my in-laws' place. Elsie was preparing dinner when I arrived. "Welcome back." "What was it, Mom?" Actually, I hesitated. "Elsie, is it about the divorce?" "If so, I'm all for it." "Aren't you, Elsie?" Shocked, Elsie said, "I don't need a dad like him." That's Elsie's catchphrase, so she was actually supporting the divorce. I finally realized how she felt. "Elsie, I'm sorry I've caused you trouble." "I'm fine, fine." "But Grandma," Elsie glanced at my mother-in-law, realizing. I turned to her. "Mom, it's okay. It's Harry's fault, isn't it?" "Well, yes, but..." I averted my gaze. Then, my mother-in-law patted my head. "So, you moved things along because you saw this coming." "Yes, but what about you, Mom?" "It's fine. I've made up my mind too," my mother-in-law smiled warmly. I felt a sense of relief, and at the same time, tears started to flow. I had actually been encouraging her to consider moving into a care facility. It wasn't that I didn't want to take care of her, it was to ensure she wouldn't be in trouble when I got divorced. So, I was glad she was positive about moving into the facility. We had already been making progress with the arrangements, all that was left was to get her consent. "Then I'll proceed with the care facility arrangements, please do," my mother-in-law nodded firmly. The next day, I began handling various procedures, looking for a new place, finding a lawyer. There was so much to do, especially finding a house for Elsie and me. Comfort was key. I visited several real estate agents. 3 days later, as I left a real estate office, my phone started ringing. "Hello." The moment I answered, a loud voice blasted through. "How many times do you think I've called you, Ella?" I instinctively pulled the phone away and murmured, "Yes, it's me, Ella." "Where are you?" "At a real estate office." "Why?" As I asked, Ella's voice got even louder. "Real estate. Looking for a house with stolen money, are you?" "Stolen? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb." The passbook Harry gave me was empty. I tried to calm my breathing. I revealed the truth, the account was empty from the start. We were always struggling financially. "Don't lie, Harry's company pays well." "There's no way you had financial troubles," Ella's loud voice hurt my ear. I brought the phone back to my face and continued, "Well, no matter how good the salary, supporting a lover as well would naturally drain it." "What do you mean? You still don't get it." That's why I patiently explained it to her. Actually, Harry had been splitting his salary into 2 parts, one for supporting our family and the other for spending on Ella. It looked like about 70% was for us, and the rest was used for Ella. I found out about this after I discovered their affair. Wanting more evidence, I hired a professional to investigate. That's when the salary issue came to light. When I told Ella this, she raised her voice in disbelief. "What? You lived on 70% of his salary? That's impossible, stop lying." "That's why I was working part-time." "But that's..." Ella stuttered. I pressed on, "So, there's no money left. But you must have some, give it to me." Then, her audacity was astonishing, but I couldn't just let it slide. "I only have what I earned myself. If you have a problem, I'll add it to the alimony." "Add to it?" "Yes, the alimony I'll demand from you as the mistress." I was thinking of the usual amount, but since you're complaining. I was cut off as the phone call abruptly ended. After that, Ella didn't answer any of my calls. She must be reflecting, I thought, but it seemed not. The next day, Ella called again. As soon as I answered, she started yelling, "Where did you hide her? You don't answer my calls, and now what are you talking about? That woman, where did you put her?" Who was she talking about? Surely not Elsie. What did she mean? As I pondered, Ella couldn't hold back and shouted, Harry's mother. She's got money, right? She's not at home, where did you hide her? Oh, you mean Mom, where is she? Tell me. Ella seemed quite desperate, realizing she was planning to ask my mother-in-law for money. I firmly refused, sorry, but I won't tell you. Why not? She's got money, right? If not, sell the in-laws' house. Ella's greed was on full display. She talked about taking my mother-in-law's money or failing that, selling her house to get the cash. She repeated this several times. Sighing, I asked Ella, you sure you want to discuss this with me? Doesn't matter. Once the divorce papers are in, you're just a stranger. That might be true, but what if I told my mother-in-law about her plans? Ella seemed unable to even consider that possibility. Had they been squandering that much money? I was baffled, but then I reconsidered. It's too much trouble. So, I'll tell you about my mother-in-law. You should have confessed from the start. Where is she? In a senior care facility. The address is. I gave Ella the address I had noted down. Ella began to laugh. I'll go there right away and start the process to sell the house. That's impossible. Why are you upset? No, it's just that the house doesn't exist anymore. As I said this, Ella's laughter abruptly stopped. After a pause, she cautiously asked me, what do you mean my mother-in-law sold the house? The money was used for her care facility. Sold it, I recalled. When I first suggested the care facility to my mother-in-law, she initially refused, citing the lack of funds for admission. That's when I proposed selling the house. She hesitated but eventually decided to sell. We didn't want Harry to catch on to our plans until I brought up divorce, so she continued living in the house, paying rent, until our divorce discussion started. And now here we are. So, she doesn't have any money left. That's right. This is your fault. Don't forget this. With a scream that sounded like the death throes, Ella hung up the phone. Anyway, she must have given up by now. Let those two do whatever they want. While thinking this, I methodically proceeded with the divorce procedures. First, I hired a lawyer to claim alimony. I was sure they would resist, but surprisingly, they accepted the amount suggested by the lawyer. Later, I received the alimony through the lawyer. At the same time, I signed the divorce papers and had them delivered to Harry. Harry apparently signed them readily, and I successfully completed the divorce. It took 3 months to finalize everything. It was tough, but I'm glad I persevered. Relieved, I went to thank my lawyer. That's when I was handed something unexpected, a wedding celebration party. It was an invitation to a wedding party. Ella, not knowing my home address, had left it with the lawyer. Was she inviting me to gloat as the woman whose husband was taken away? I was about to tear it up right there, but then I had a second thought. Harry's associates would surely be at the party. Maybe I could do something. I contacted a certain person. Sure enough, they had also received an invitation. So, I decided to attend the wedding party. The venue was a hotel's banquet hall. It was called a party, but it was essentially a wedding reception. They really went all out despite having no money. As I was thinking this, a voice came from behind, "Thank you for coming." I turned around to see Ella in a dress, with Harry beside her. If you're going to do this, you might as well have had a wedding. Sorry, I can't wear a wedding dress because I'm pregnant. Ella was clearly heavily pregnant. She was willing to go this far just to humiliate me. I responded, looking away, "Oh, right. But I'm glad you came." "I thought you wouldn't." Ella made a show of pretending to cry. "Don't cry now," I said, knowing full well I looked around, noticing people quickly avert their eyes. Ella must have said something convenient for her. The atmosphere felt oddly cold. If that's how they want to play it, I'm ready to go all out. A fire ignited in my heart. Pretending to console Ella, I scanned the room for someone. Soon, I found the person I was looking for. "Oh, sorry. I see someone I know," I said quickly, excusing myself. For some reason, Ella followed me. But I expected this. She would want to make a spectacle of me, I thought. So, with that in mind, I decided to leave the place. I approached the person from behind. "Sorry to keep you waiting." The person turned around at my voice. It was Daisy. "Oh, you're already here." "Yes, just greeted my ex-husband and his new friend," as I gestured towards them. Harry suddenly became flustered. He awkwardly bowed to Daisy. Thank you for coming today. But why is Ione's friend here?" "I'm accompanying my husband, you know." "I don't think you've met him yet." Daisy smiled and pulled the arm of a man standing beside her. Harry's face went pale. Daisy introduced her husband to Harry. "This is my husband, Ted. He owns a local supermarket and is a customer of your company, Mr. Scott's." Harry looked away, embarrassed. Daisy's husband was a VIP customer of Harry's company. He bought not only his own car but also Daisy's car from Harry's dealership. He even referred his supermarket employees to Harry's company. In other words, he was a very important customer to Harry. It's no wonder Harry was panicking amidst this. Daisy introduced me to her husband. "This is my friend, Ivone. We're partners in an investment company." As Daisy said this, Ella's face changed color. "Investment company? What's that?" "Exactly what it sounds like. Harry's salary wasn't enough, so I've always been investing, and it grew into this. This happened right after I discovered Harry and Ella's affair. I realized I needed a stable income for the divorce. That's when I turned to investing, something I started after getting married. Being a former banker, I had some knowledge about investments. Increasing my investment amount turned out to be a huge hit. Before I knew it, I had a stable income. I told Daisy about it, and she became interested. We started investing together, and soon other mom friends caught wind of it. Then we thought, why not start a company? So we did, and that's how we started our business. So, after the divorce, I started working at the investment company. I have a good income now, and I'm glad I got divorced." What do you mean? How about you? Did you manage to get the money?" Ella looked away, obviously upset. I continued with a smile. "Well, you must be in a tougher financial situation now, huh? Because Harry is in such a state, right?" I pointed to where Harry was kneeling. Apparently, he had been scolded by Daisy's husband. "I'm sorry my affair caused all this. I'll be honest from now on. Please continue doing business with us." Harry was desperately apologizing, but Daisy's husband ignored him. In the end, Harry was left in the lurch. After losing an important client, he became an outcast at work, talked about behind his back by bosses and colleagues. Unable to bear such a life, Harry resigned. Meanwhile, pregnant Ella pressed Harry for a divorce, but being pregnant, she couldn't work. Reluctantly, she decided to divorce. After giving birth, they are currently in the midst of a messy divorce trial. To cover the costs of the trial, Harry works at a construction site, while Ella works at a nightclub. They both toil tirelessly, each trying to discredit the other in court. I heard all this from my mother-in-law, whom I still visit after the divorce. Elsie is her granddaughter, after all. Elsie is preparing for her middle school entrance exams next year. "Mom, is it okay if I go to a private school? Do we have enough money?" "Of course, dear. Mom will work hard, so you should too." "Okay, I want to be like you, Mom, so I'll do my best. Elsie gives me the strength to keep going. I met my true friend, Daisy. My happiness is all thanks to Elsie. I'd do anything for her, that's how strongly I feel.
I stared at Jack, my husband of 15 years, wondering if I'd heard him correctly. You want us to move in with your mother? The words felt foreign on my tongue, like a phrase from a language I'd never learned. Jack's eyes darted away from mine, focusing on the framed photo of us on our wedding day. It's just temporary, Claire. Mom's having a hard time since Dad passed. She needs us. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. And what about what we need, Jack? What about our plans? He shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes about his indifference. Plans change. Mom's alone now. It's the right thing to do. The right thing. How many times had I heard that phrase throughout our marriage? I bit back a bitter laugh. And what does Susan think about this? She's thrilled, Jack said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. Says it'll be like old times. Old times. When Jack was her perfect little boy, and I was just the interloper who'd stolen him away. I could already imagine Susan's critical gaze, her thinly veiled barbs about my shortcomings as a wife and daughter-in-law. Jack, I don't think. He cut me off with a wave of his hand. It's decided, Claire. We're moving next week. I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. Next week? But that's so soon. What about my job? Our house? You can commute, he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. And we'll rent out the house. It'll be good for us, you'll see. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him understand how ridiculous this all sounded. But years of keeping the peace had trained me well. Instead, I nodded, feeling like a coward. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. Where are you going? Jack called after me. For a walk, I said, not bothering to look back. The crisp autumn air hit me like a slap to the face as I stepped outside. I walked aimlessly, my mind racing with all the implications of Jack's announcement. How had we gotten here? When had my opinions, my desires become so insignificant? Lost in thought, I nearly collided with my neighbor Sarah. Whoa there, Claire, she said, steadying me. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile. Just got some surprising news. Jack wants us to move in with his mother. Sarah's eyes widened. Susan, the woman who called you a barren disappointment at your last Christmas dinner? I winced at the memory. That's the one. Oh, honey, Sarah said, pulling me into a hug. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't seem to have much choice in the matter. Sarah pulled back, her hands on my shoulders. There's always a choice, Claire. You just have to be brave enough to make it. As I walked home, Sarah's words echoed in my mind. I'd spent so long trying to be the perfect wife, to make everyone else happy. Maybe it was time to start thinking about my own happiness. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the unfamiliar car parked in our driveway. As I approached, I saw Jack emerge from the house, followed by a woman I'd never seen before. They were laughing, heads close together in conspiratorial intimacy. My heart stopped as I watched Jack lean in and kiss her cheek, his hand lingering on her waist. The woman climbed into her car and Jack waved goodbye, a smile on his face I hadn't seen in years. As the car pulled away, Jack turned and saw me standing there. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of panic. Claire, he said, his voice strained, I can explain. But in that moment I realized there was nothing left to explain. The perfect life I'd been desperately clinging to had been an illusion all along, and now, standing in the fading light of day, I knew that everything was about to change. The moving van pulled away, leaving me standing in Susan's driveway, surrounded by boxes and the suffocating weight of my new reality. Jack was already inside, probably basking in his mother's adoration. I took a deep breath and stepped through the front door, bracing myself for what lay ahead. There you are, Claire. Susan's voice rang out, sharp as a knife. I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind. I forced a smile, just making sure we didn't forget anything. Susan's eyes narrowed. Well, don't just stand there. Start unpacking. I want this mess cleared up before dinner. As I lugged boxes upstairs, I caught snippets of Jack and Susan's conversation from the kitchen. Their laughter felt like a personal affront, a reminder of my outsider status in this house. Claire? Jack called. Can you come down here for a sec? I descended the stairs, my guard up. Jack and Susan were seated at the kitchen table, matching expressions of false concern on their faces. "Honey," Jack began, his tone sickeningly sweet, "Mom and I were talking, and we think it might be best if you take the guest room for now." I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" Susan jumped in. "It's just that Jack's old room is rather small for two, and well, with your difficulties, we thought you might appreciate the extra space." My difficulties. As if my struggle to conceive was a personal failing, a defect to be hidden away in the guest room. "And where will you sleep, Jack?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I'll take my old room. It'll be easier for work, you know?" I bit my tongue, tasting blood. This was about more than sleeping arrangements. This was about erasing me, bit by bit, from their perfect family picture. "Fine," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I'll take the guest room." As I turned to leave, Susan called out, "Oh, and Claire, be a dear and start on dinner, won't you? I'm famished." That night, lying alone in the cold guest room, I replayed the scene I'd witnessed in our driveway. The woman, the kiss, Jack's panicked expression when he saw me. I'd been too shocked then to confront him, but now anger bubbled up inside me. I crept downstairs, intent on finally having it out with Jack. But as I approached his door, I heard hushed voices. "You need to be more careful, Jack," Susan whispered. "What if Claire had seen you?" My breath caught in my throat. "Don't worry, Mom," Jack replied. "Claire doesn't suspect a thing. She's too busy trying to be the perfect wife to notice what's right in front of her." I stumbled back, my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. Susan knew. She'd known all along about Jack's affair, and worse, she was helping him hide it. Rage, hot and fierce, coursed through me. I wanted to burst into the room, to scream and throw things, but a small, calculating voice in my head held me back. If I confronted them now, they'd only deny it. No, I needed proof. I needed to play their game better than they did. Back in the guest room, I pulled out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "Claire?" She answered, groggy with sleep. "What's wrong?" "I need your help," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'm going to take down Jack and Susan, and I need you to be my alibi." There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice came back, fully alert. "I'm listening." As I outlined my plan, a sense of purpose washed over me. For years, I'd let Jack and Susan dictate my life, my worth. But no more. They thought they had me cornered, isolated in this house of lies. But they'd underestimated me. Let them think I was the perfect, obedient wife. Let them believe I was clueless and weak. I'd play the part, all while gathering the evidence I needed to blow their carefully constructed world apart. The game was on, and this time I intended to win. The fertility clinic's waiting room was a study in quiet desperation. I sat alone, surrounded by couples holding hands and whispering encouragement. Jack had begged off, claiming an important meeting. I knew better now. "Claire Thompson?" The nurse's voice cut through my thoughts. I followed her to the examination room, my heart heavy. Dr. Patel greeted me with a sympathetic smile. "I'm afraid I don't have good news, Claire," she said gently. "The latest round of treatments hasn't been successful." I nodded, numb. How many times had I sat in this room hoping for a miracle? "Have you and Jack considered other options?" Dr. Patel asked. "There are still avenues we could explore." "I'll discuss it with him," I lied, knowing full well that Jack had lost interest in our fertility journey long ago. As I left the clinic, my phone buzzed. A text from Susan, "Dinner at 6. Don't be late." I arrived home to find Susan in the kitchen, a whirlwind of activity. "There you are," she said, barely looking up. "Start chopping those vegetables. Jack's bringing a guest." My stomach clenched. "A guest?" "Yes, his new assistant. Amanda, I think her name is. Lovely girl." I nearly sliced my finger, my hand shaking with sudden realization. "Amanda, the woman from the driveway." "Oh, and Claire?" Susan's voiced with false concern. "You might want to freshen up. You look a bit worn." I bit back a retort and headed upstairs. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed older, tired. When had I become this shadow of myself? The sound of laughter drifted up from downstairs. I recognized Jack's voice, followed by a lilting female laugh that set my teeth on edge. I descended the stairs slowly, steeling myself. Jack stood in the living room, his arm casually draped over a young woman's shoulders. She was everything I wasn't. Young, vibrant, carefree. "Claire!" Jack called out too loudly. Come meet Amanda. She's been a godsend at the office. I shook Amanda's hand, noting how she leaned into Jack. It's so nice to finally meet you, she gushed. Jack talks about you all the time. Does he now? I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Throughout dinner, I watched Jack and Amanda, noting every shared glance, every accidental touch. Susan beamed at them, playing the perfect hostess. So, Amanda, Susan said, refilling her wine glass, do you plan on having children someday? Amanda blushed. Oh, I'd love to. I've always wanted a big family. Unlike some people, Susan muttered, her eyes flicking to me. The room fell silent. I set down my fork, the clatter echoing in the sudden quiet. I'm sorry, Susan, I said, my voice dangerously calm. What exactly do you mean by that? Susan waved her hand dismissively. Oh, nothing, dear. It's just, well, you've been trying for so long. Maybe it's time to accept that motherhood isn't in the cards for you. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me, I managed, fleeing to the kitchen. I gripped the counter, trying to steady my breathing. The kitchen door swung open, and Jack entered. Claire, what's wrong with you? He hissed. You're embarrassing me. I turned to face him, years of pent-up anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. What's wrong with me? You bring your mistress to dinner and ask what's wrong with me? Jack's face paled. Keep your voice down, he warned. Amanda's not. It's not what you think. Isn't it? I challenged. Tell me, Jack. Tell me I'm wrong. He opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to form the lie. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I'd spent years trying to be the perfect wife, enduring Susan's jabs, Jack's indifference, the painful fertility treatments. For what? For this farce of a family. I brushed past Jack, back into the dining room. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me expectantly. I have an announcement, I said, my voice ringing clear. I'm not pregnant. I'll never be pregnant. And you know what? I'm done trying. With that, I walked out of the house, leaving behind a stunned silence. As I stood in the driveway, the cool night air on my face, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. The game had changed, and I was finally ready to play by my own rules. I found myself at my mother's doorstep, tears streaming down my face. She opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me into a fierce hug. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered, stroking my hair. What's happened? Inside, over a steaming mug of tea, I poured out everything. Jack's affair, Susan's cruelty, the failed fertility treatments. Mom listened, her face a mix of concern and barely contained anger. Claire, she said when I'd finished, why are you putting yourself through this? I stared into my tea, searching for an answer. I wanted the family I never had growing up, the perfect marriage, the white picket fence, the whole package. Mom's eyes softened. Oh, honey, is that what this has all been about? She reached for an old photo album, flipping to a picture of us from years ago. There we were, just the 2 of us at my high school graduation, beaming at the camera. Look at us, she said. We might not have been the traditional family, but we were happy, weren't we? I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. You don't need a man or a baby to complete you, Claire. You're already whole. Her words hit me like a tidal wave, washing away years of insecurity and doubt. I'd been so focused on creating the perfect family that I'd lost sight of what truly mattered, my own happiness and self-worth. What do I do now? I asked, feeling both liberated and terrified. Mom squeezed my hand. You fight. Not for Jack or that sham of a marriage, but for yourself. The next morning, I returned to Susan's house with a renewed sense of purpose. I found Jack in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. Where were you? He demanded. I was worried sick. I almost laughed at the absurdity of his concern. I needed some time to think, I said calmly, and I've made a decision. Jack's eyebrows shot up. Oh? I'm moving out, I stated, my voice steady. This isn't working, Jack. It hasn't been for a long time. He set down his mug, his face a mask of disbelief. You can't be serious. What about our family? Our future? What family? I countered. The one where you cheat on me and your mother covers for you? The one where I'm constantly reminded of my failures? Jack's face paled. You know about... Amanda? Yes, I know. I'm not as blind as you think I am. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Claire, please, we can work this out. I'll end things with Amanda, I promise. For a moment, I wavered. This was everything I'd wanted to hear for so long, but then I remembered my mother's words, and my resolve strengthened. It's too late, Jack. I deserve better than this. As I turned to leave, Susan appeared in the doorway, her face twisted with anger. "You ungrateful little," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you?" I stood my ground, meeting her gaze. "You've done nothing but tear me down, Susan. But I'm not your punching bag anymore." I brushed past her, heading upstairs to pack my things. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I heard raised voices from below. Jack and Susan were arguing, their words muffled but their tones clear. Suddenly there was a crash, followed by silence. Alarmed, I crept down the stairs. In the living room, I found Jack on his knees, surrounded by shattered glass. Susan stood over him, her face a mask of cold fury. "You fool," she spat. "I told you to be careful, now look what you've done." Jack looked up, his eyes meeting mine. In that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before, fear. "Claire," he whispered, "there's something you need to know." I stood frozen, caught between the urge to flee and a desperate need to uncover the truth. Whatever Jack was about to reveal, I knew it would change everything. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the room, ready to face whatever came next. I stood in the living room, my heart pounding as I waited for Jack to speak. Susan's eyes darted between us, a mix of fury and fear in her gaze. "Claire," Jack began, his voice trembling, I can't have children." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. "What?" I whispered, struggling to comprehend. Jack couldn't meet my eyes. "I've known for years, long before we got married." The room spun around me as the implications sank in. All those fertility treatments, the disappointments, the blame I'd shouldered, it had all been for nothing. "You let me think it was my fault," I said, my voice rising. "You watched me go through treatment after treatment, knowing all along." Susan stepped forward, her face a mask of cold indifference. "It was for the best, Claire. We couldn't let people know Jack was defective." I recoiled at her words, disgust rising in my throat. "So you both decided to let me suffer instead, to make me feel like a failure?" Jack reached for me, but I jerked away. "I'm sorry, Claire. I was afraid you'd leave me if you knew the truth." A bitter laugh escaped me. "And this was better? Lying to me for years, making me think I was broken?" "You don't understand," Susan hissed. "Our family name, our reputation." "Your reputation?" I cut her off, fury building inside me. "Is that all you care about?" Suddenly a memory flashed through my mind. Susan's smug face as she introduced Amanda at dinner. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "That's why you brought Amanda into our lives," I said, turning to Susan. "You were trying to get Jack an heir, weren't you? With or without my knowledge." The guilty look that passed between Jack and Susan confirmed my suspicions. I felt physically ill. "How long?" I demanded. "How long have you been planning this?" Jack's silence was answer enough. I turned to leave, unable to bear another moment in their presence. "Claire, wait," Jack called after me. "Please, we can work this out. We can adopt, or—" I whirled around, years of pent-up anger and hurt pouring out. "Work what out, Jack?" "The years of lies, the manipulation, the fact that your mother was basically pimping you out to your assistant?" Susan gasped, affronted. "How dare you? Everything I've done has been for this family." "No," I said, my voice cold. "Everything you've done has been for yourself, for your precious reputation." I turned to Jack, seeing him clearly for the first time. "And you? You're no better. You were willing to let me believe I was the problem rather than face the truth." Jack's face crumpled. "I love you, Claire. Please don't go." For a moment, I wavered. Despite everything, a part of me still longed for the life I'd dreamed of, the family I'd never had. But then I remembered my mother's words. I was already whole. "Love isn't supposed to hurt like this," I said softly. "It's not supposed to make you feel small and worthless." I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. "I'm leaving," I announced. "Not just this house, but this marriage. I deserve better than lies and manipulation." Susan sneered. "And where will you go? You have nothing without us." I met her gaze, standing tall. "I have myself, and that's more than enough." As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Sarah. "How'd it go? Do you need backup?" I smiled, realizing I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. With newfound determination, I typed my reply. "It's over. Can I crash at your place tonight? We have some planning to do." As I hit send, I knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of my story, not the end. I'd been staying at Sarah's for a week, plotting my next move when the call came. Jack's voice crackled through the speaker, urgent and pleading. "Claire, please, we need to talk. Mom's in the hospital." My first instinct was to hang up, but something in his tone gave me pause. "What happened?" "She collapsed. The doctors, they're not sure. Please, Claire, I need you." Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing to meet him at the hospital. As I walked through the sterile corridors, my mind raced. Was this another manipulation? A ploy to get me back? I found Jack in the waiting room, his face pale and drawn. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with, vulnerable and lost. "How is she?" I asked, keeping my distance. "Stable for now. They're running tests." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "Thank you for coming." We sat in uncomfortable silence until a doctor approached. "Mr. Thompson, your mother is awake. She's asking for both of you." Surprised, I followed Jack to Susan's room. She lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller and frailer than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes locked onto mine as we entered. "Claire," she said, her voice weak. "I need to tell you something." Jack tensed beside me. "Mom, maybe now's not the time." "No," Susan interrupted. "She needs to know. I can't carry this anymore." I stepped closer, curiosity overriding my caution. "What is it, Susan?" She took a shaky breath. "Jack's affair. It wasn't his idea. It was mine." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "What?" "I pushed him into it," Susan continued, tears forming in her eyes. I thought if he got another woman pregnant, we could pass the child off as yours. Save the family name." I staggered back, feeling as if I'd been physically struck. You orchestrated all of this?" Jack reached for me, his face a mask of shame. "Claire, I'm so sorry. I should have stood up to her, should have told you the truth." But I was beyond hearing his apologies. Years of pain, humiliation, and self-doubt crashed over me like a tidal wave. Every snide comment, every accidental meeting with Amanda, every fertility treatment I'd endured, it had all been part of their sick plan. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. "How could you do this to me?" Susan's face crumpled. "I was trying to protect our family, our legacy. I never meant what?" I cut her off, my voice rising. "Never meant to destroy my self-esteem? Never meant to make me feel worthless and broken? Never meant for me to find out?" Jack stepped between us. "Claire, please, she's sick. We can talk about this later." But I was done waiting, done being silenced. "No, we'll talk about it now. You both used me, manipulated me, lied to me for years. And for what? Your precious family name?" I turned to Susan, years of pent-up anger pouring out. "You know what, Susan? You didn't just fail to protect your family. You destroyed it. Congratulations." With that, I stormed out of the room, ignoring Jack's calls behind me. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, struggling to breathe. The weight of their betrayal pressed down on me, threatening to crush me entirely. But beneath the pain and anger, I felt something else stirring, a fierce determination. They had taken so much from me, but I refused to let them take anything more. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Everything okay? Need an escape plan?" I smiled grimly, a plan forming in my mind. It was time to take back control, to show Jack and Susan exactly what I was capable of. I typed back, "Meet me at the house. It's time to end this. On my terms." As I left the hospital, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The final battle was coming, and this time, I was ready for war. The dining room buzzed with chatter as our friends gathered for what they thought was a simple dinner party. Little did they know, they were about to witness the implosion of my marriage. I moved through the room, a forced smile plastered on my face, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Jack hovered nearby, his eyes following me nervously. He knew something was off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. "Claire, darling." Susan's saccharine voice cut through the noise. She'd insisted on attending, despite her recent hospital stay. "Everything looks lovely." I turned to her, my smile never wavering. "Thank you, Susan. I'm so glad you could make it." As our guests took their seats, I caught Sarah's eye across the table. She gave me a subtle nod, reminding me of our plan. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Jack stood to make a toast, raising his glass. "To friends, family, and new beginnings," he said, his eyes meeting mine in a silent plea. I let him finish, waiting for the perfect moment. As the clinking of glasses subsided, I slowly rose to my feet. "I'd like to make a toast as well," I announced, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. Jack's face paled. "Claire, what are you doing?" I ignored him, addressing our friends instead. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Your friendship has meant the world to me, especially during difficult times." A hush fell over the room. I could feel all eyes on me waiting. "You see," I continued, "Jack and I have been going through some challenges lately, fertility issues among other things." Susan shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Claire, perhaps this isn't the time." "Oh, I think it's the perfect time, Susan," I cut her off, my voice sharp. "After all, you've played such a crucial role in our marriage. Why don't you tell everyone about your brilliant plan?" Jack stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Claire, stop this. Now." But I was beyond stopping. Years of pain and anger fueled my words. "Did you know that Jack can't have children? That all those fertility treatments I went through were for nothing?" Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Jack's face was ashen, his eyes pleading. "But that's not even the best part," I pressed on, my voice rising. "Tell them, Jack. Tell them about Amanda." "Who's Amanda?" someone asked. I laughed, a bitter sound. "Oh, just the woman Jack's been sleeping with. At his mother's suggestion, I might add." The room erupted into chaos. Friends looked between Jack and me, shock and disbelief on their faces. Susan attempted to interject, but I silenced her with a glare. "You see, Susan here thought it would be a great idea for Jack to get another woman pregnant, pass the baby off as mine to save the precious family name." Jack lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "Claire, that's enough." I wrenched away from him, tears stinging my eyes. "No, Jack, it's not nearly enough. For years, I've been manipulated, lied to, made to feel worthless. Well, I'm done." I turned to our stunned friends. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this, but I couldn't let their lies continue. I couldn't let them win." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Jack stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and shame. Susan had her head in her hands, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. As I looked around at the faces of our friends, some sympathetic, others horrified, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The truth was out. There was no going back now. "I think it's time for me to go," I said quietly, gathering my things. As I walked towards the door, I heard Jack's broken voice behind me. "Claire, please, don't leave." I paused, turning to face him one last time. "I'm not leaving, Jack. I'm escaping." With that, I stepped out into the cool night air, leaving behind the shattered remains of my old life. As I walked away from the house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it, on my own terms. The morning sun streamed through the windows of my new apartment as I sipped my coffee, savoring the quiet. It had been 3 months since the dinner party, 3 months of rebuilding my life piece by piece. The divorce papers sat on the coffee table, signed and ready to be filed. A knock at the door startled me from my reverie. I opened it to find Jack standing there, looking haggard and desperate. "Claire," he said, his voice hoarse. "Please, can we talk?" I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. We sat across from each other, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. "I've left Susan's house," Jack began. "I've ended things with Amanda. I want to make this right." I studied him, searching for any trace of the man I'd once loved. "It's too late for that, Jack. You know that, don't you?" He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I know. I don't know how to live without you." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old longing, the desire to comfort him. But then I remembered all the lies, all the pain. "You'll learn," I said firmly, "just like I did." Jack's gaze fell on the divorce papers. "So this is really it, then?" I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. "It is. I hope you find happiness, Jack, but it won't be with me." As he left, I felt a chapter of my life closing. But instead of grief, I felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. Later that day, I met Sarah for lunch. She grinned as I approached, raising her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said. I clinked my glass against hers, smiling. "And to true friends." As we ate, Sarah leaned in conspiratorially. "So, have you thought about what's next? The world's your oyster now, Claire." I paused, considering. "You know, I think I might go back to school, finish that degree I put on hold when I got married." Sarah beamed. "That's my girl. Show them what you're made of." As we finished our meal, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Proud of you, sweetheart. Dinner tonight? Warmth spread through my chest. Throughout this ordeal, my mother had been my rock, reminding me of the strength I'd inherited from her. That evening, as we sat in her cozy kitchen, Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "How are you really doing, Claire?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I took a deep breath, considering the question. "I'm okay," I said slowly. "Better than okay, actually. For the first time in years, I feel like myself again." Mom nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You know, when your father left, I thought my world had ended, but it was just beginning. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find ourselves." Her words resonated deep within me. I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to fit into the mold of the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law, how I'd lost myself in the process. "I think I'm ready to start living for myself," I said, surprised by the conviction in my voice. Mom smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "That's my brave girl." As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was excited about the journey. Back in my apartment, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. I thought of Jack, of Susan, of the life I'd left behind. There was sadness there, yes, but also a profound sense of freedom. I picked up a framed photo from my bedside table. Me at my college graduation, young and full of dreams. I traced my younger self's smile, remembering the hope and ambition I'd once had. "Time to dream again," I whispered to myself. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was older, wiser, with a few more lines around her eyes. But there was a spark there that I hadn't seen in years, a spark of possibility, of life yet to be lived. I smiled at my reflection, feeling a surge of excitement for the future. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for it, ready to rediscover the woman I'd always been meant to be. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. This isn't the end of my story, it's just the beginning.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sandy. I'm not a wealthy woman, and while I haven't been mistreated by my mother-in-law, but I was mistreated by my own parents. This story is about my useless husband, Thomas, and how my parents supported him more than they ever supported me. I've never shared this with anyone before because I don't have many people in my life. I met Thomas about 6 years ago on a dating website. He had a decent job and seemed like a good guy. Thomas wasn't a knight in shining armor, but he was definitely a good boyfriend. We had some great years together at the start of our relationship. We dated for 4 years and then got married. He was a great partner to me and quickly became my parents' favorite. However, I started to feel some resentment toward him because of that. At every family dinner, my parents would say things like, "We're so happy to have you in our family, Thomas. Sandy finally made a good choice in life by bringing you to us." God really answered our prayers and gave us what we wanted. You know, we always wanted a son, but never had one. You're such a nice young man and perfect for our family. Yes, Sandy is okay and all, but she can't be our son. She doesn't understand that Sandy has always been a little selfish and greedy for attention. We're glad you stuck with her despite her flaws. They were right. I was selfish and greedy for affection. My parents always wanted a son but couldn't have one. They even tried for a bit after having me, but it wasn't possible, which made them resent me throughout my life. When I was young, I couldn't understand why they neglected me and favored other children, especially if they were boys. They always complained about me and how they missed out on having a son. As I grew up, I was determined to prove to them that I could be just as good as a son. I got great grades, went to college, and secured a good job. I even sent them monthly allowances so they wouldn't have to work anymore, yet they never appreciated me. Thomas did nothing for them, but they loved him more than me. I tried to push aside my resentment because I was happy that my parents finally approved of one choice I made. Thomas also enjoyed the attention he got from my parents. His own parents had disowned him, and I didn't know why. None of his relatives even came to our wedding. Slowly, I started to understand why almost everyone in his life cut him off. He was a thief. I wish I were exaggerating, but I'm not. At first, it started with him being lazy. One day, he suddenly took a lower-paying job because he didn't want to work long hours anymore. He said it was to avoid getting depressed. So I decided to switch jobs at my company and took a lower position with a pay cut to help out. Why would you do that, Thomas? This is a serious pay cut, and it will affect our life, I said. Why would it affect us? You earn well enough to support our lifestyle. Just put more money into our joint account. That would solve everything, he replied. You can't just assume that, Thomas. Things like this require a family discussion. If you want more money from me, you should have discussed it with me first. Do you have no regard for my mental health? Why would I even discuss this with you? We're married, so there's no my money or your money anymore. Stop being so dramatic, Thomas said. I was a bit annoyed by how casually he was acting about the whole situation, and the fact that he refused to separate our finances worried me. But I still supported him because I loved him. That was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made. This man spent all his money and time on video games. Yes, whatever little money he earned was spent on them. He put $500 into our joint account, but later he took out even more for himself. Thomas and I had countless arguments about this in the past. He was draining my savings and taking almost all of my paychecks. Sometimes he didn't even contribute anything to the household. He didn't help with chores either. All he did was work, play games, and spend money on things he wanted. I was getting sick and tired of being financially taken advantage of. No amount of talking ever helped. Instead, he always turned things around on me and yelled at me. My parents also took his side. They said, "Sandy, why is your husband calling us saying that you are financially abusing him? This is very unlike you, Sandy. You better explain yourself." Dad, I'm not financially abusing him. In fact, it's the opposite. He's been draining my savings and making me pay for 90% of our household expenses. So what, Sandy? People need to spend money on their family after marriage. It's shameful how you don't let Thomas use your credit card. You're punishing him for not having a fancy job like you. How did you become so greedy? Mom, he's misused my credit cards before. That's why I don't let him use them anymore. I can't risk our future knowing he has no control over his spending. But my parents still took Thomas's side, which made me even angrier. I knew he was using my parents to make me give him all my money. Little by little, all the love I had for him faded away. But one day, things reached a breaking point. I discovered that he had taken $20,000 from my personal account without permission. And what did he spend it on? A new gaming PC and accessories. I was furious. I tried to get the charges canceled, but it didn't work. So as a last resort, I decided to report it to the police. Thomas was livid when they came to arrest him that day. I was determined that my marriage had to end. I needed to get out. What I didn't realize was that I would lose more than just Thomas because of my decision. I texted my parents to tell them what happened. I didn't want them to hear about it from someone else, so I told them that night. They saw the messages but didn't reply. I was a little worried about their silence, but I was too exhausted to think about it, so I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and saw a text from Thomas. It read, "Hey wife, I'm already out of jail." Surprised? I am too. I never thought your parents would be the ones to bail me out. What? My parents bailed you out? That's impossible. They would never do that to me. You're wrong, Sandy. One call from me, and your parents were eager to help. They even cursed you out at the police station. I must say, they're very disappointed in you. Those words made my stomach churn. I couldn't believe my parents would do something like this. I rushed over to their house, desperate for answers. I had tried to keep them out of the situation, but somehow they had still managed to talk to Thomas and even paid for his bail. My anger grew as I thought about what they had done. I walked into my parents' house and said, "Mom, Dad, please don't tell me you bailed Thomas out. Don't tell me what I heard is true. I can't believe you would do something like this. Sandy, we raised you better than that. You're just punishing Thomas because he didn't listen to you after marriage. He has every right to use your credit card. All your money is his money too." "He did nothing wrong," my dad replied. "Dad, he stole from me. He took $20,000 from my accounts, and this was after he had already emptied our joint account in the past." "When does it stop?" I asked. "We know you've been financially controlling toward him, Sandy. It's not right to shame your own husband for spending money. You were a bad wife to him. Thomas told us how you refused to put more money into your joint account, Spouses shouldn't hide their money from each other. Thomas doesn't hide anything from you, Dad insisted. Thomas didn't hide money because he had nothing to hide. After every paycheck, he had no money left. He barely contributed anything to our household expenses. Oh my God, are you shaming a man for earning less than you? What can poor Thomas do when he earns so little? I can't believe what a greedy and selfish brat you've become, Dad said angrily. No matter what I said, my parents continued to support Thomas. I should have seen this coming. They always preferred him because he was a man. Thomas filled the gap in their hearts from not having a son. Having a good and successful daughter wasn't enough for them. Still, I thought they wouldn't choose any man over their own child. I was wrong. My parents were completely hopeless. Their words hurt deeply, and I was both disappointed and sad. But I wasn't prepared for what they said next. Sandy, you have truly turned into a horrible woman. We're ashamed of what you've become. We can't be associated with such a selfish daughter like you. So your father and I have made some decisions. We've invited Thomas over to our house. He'll be staying with us until you come to your senses. We'll pay for his lawyer fees and everything. You'd better drop the case and take him back, or we'll disown you. You're going to house the man who stole from me and financially abused me for years? Are you really going to disown me over this? You can't be serious. We are dead serious, Sandy. It's time we taught you a lesson. Just because you're financially independent doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. Thomas has been such a good son-in-law to us, and it's time we stand up for him and help him out in this tough time. He's already like a son to us, so we'll let him stay with us until you realize your mistake. Nothing could have prepared me for this. I knew my parents were biased toward my husband, but I never imagined they would disown me for him. They constantly praised my abusive, freeloading husband for his poor decisions and belittled me for being responsible. What they said that day completely shattered my heart. All the love I had for them vanished. I realized that I had been loving the wrong people all my life, but I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me anymore. So I said, fine, then have him in this house. But if he comes to live here, I will stop sending you money. I won't pay you a cent, so you can go and spend it on my loser husband. We expected that from you, Sandy. We already know what a selfish person you are. You don't have to send us money. We can take care of ourselves. It's just like you to threaten us with money. Listen to me, Sandy. You can't use your money to control us. The money you earn has made you proud, but we'll show you what a mistake you've made by using your money to manipulate people. There's no reason for us to stay in contact with you. Don't come to this house or talk to us again. I looked at my mother, and she agreed with my dad. Both of them told me to go away and never show my face again. They even said I shouldn't call or text them. I took their words to heart and left the house. I didn't cry in front of them, but I broke down in my car. I cried so much that I had to pull over to calm myself. I had spent over 30 years of my life trying to win my parents' love, and yet they threw me away like trash. They treated me like trash and called me trash. I felt like my world had ended that day. I went home and cried myself to sleep. The next day, Thomas called me just to brag about how he'd won over my parents. He was already settled into my old room and called to tell me how much my parents hated me and loved him more. He said, "Guess what, Sandy? I'm in your precious room right now. Your parents even came to pick me up. They really hate you right now." I replied, "Thomas, you're being rewarded for your crimes. It must be fun having loving parents who aren't even your own." He said, "It was so easy to manipulate them, Sandy. I didn't even have to try. You ran after them like a dog, but they never loved you like this. Honestly, I think they hated you all along. Poor little Sandy worked so hard to make her parents love her and still failed miserably." I couldn't take it anymore, so I hung up while he laughed at my misery. That horrible man even had the nerve to send me a picture of him lying on my old bed. I wanted to cry, but instead, I pulled myself together and made a plan. I was going to follow through with my promise of not sending my parents any more money. I knew that cutting off their allowance would hurt them, and I was sure Thomas would eventually show his true colors. So I stopped sending them money and waited. As I expected, just 2 days after the month ended, my parents started pestering me for money. They broke their own no contact rule and began asking, then demanding, that I send them money. Why haven't you sent us money yet? Do you know how many bills we have? They asked. I replied, What money, Dad? I already told you I'm not sending you any more money. It's funny to see you contact me after you proudly told me to get out of your life. Sandy, don't be rude. Things were said when we were all angry. It's been weeks since that incident. It's time to move on. Families don't hold grudges. So now that you need money, you suddenly remember I'm family? Yesterday, Thomas seemed more like family to you. Why don't you ask him for money? That won't be possible, Sandy. He doesn't pay for anything. We paid his bail, his phone bill, and his food. He's still asking us for money. Well, use your savings to feed him then. I'm sure you've saved some from the checks I used to give you. We already dipped into our savings when we paid for Thomas's bail. We have very little left. We need you to send us money, Sandy. It's not fair for you to hold the past over us. No, this is completely fair, Mom and Dad. For years, you treated me unfairly because I'm a girl. You chose Thomas and loved him only because he's a man. I tried so hard to be a good daughter, to win your affection, but you two just showed me how wrong I was. I should have done this a long time ago. I'm cutting you off. I don't need people like you in my life anymore. Years of hurt and betrayal poured out of me as I unloaded all my anger on them. My parents were silent while I spoke, and when I finished, they started pleading for forgiveness because they really needed my help. I hung up on them without listening any further. I had predicted that my parents would come banging on my door with apologies and pleas. I even expected some entitlement on their part. But my revenge became even sweeter because Thomas did something stupid that made my parents file a police report against him and kick him out. If you want to know why, you need to see the conversation I had with them. One day, they showed up at my doorstep to try and talk to me. I didn't open the door but spoke to them from inside. They said, Sandy, you need to hear us out, dear. We're here to apologize for our mistakes. We never should have let an outsider into our home. You are family, and you should have been our priority. We got caught up in our dream of having a son and didn't realize how bad your husband was. We've already paid dearly for it. Thomas stole our credit cards and drained our savings. We don't even have money for food anymore. Sandy, please don't let your parents starve. We need your help. We promise we'll stand by you this time. We've already reported the theft to the police and kicked Thomas out. He'll never step foot in our lives again. I replied, You should have thought about this when you happily chose Thomas over me. You're the only ones responsible for your situation now. I'll only send you money for this month, but after that, I'm done. You have a month to figure out what to do. I said that and left them on the porch. I felt a little bad for my parents, but then I remembered how little I meant to them, and that was enough to make me angry again. I did send them some money because I couldn't let them starve, but that was the last check I sent them. Just as they said, my parents filed a police report to reverse the charges on their credit cards. Surprisingly, they sent back the money I'd sent them last time. They kept begging and pleading with me for forgiveness. The begging went on for so long that I started to get used to it. I saw it coming, but didn't expect them to be so persistent. However, what they did next was even more unexpected. They actually signed over their house to me as an apology for all the mistakes they made against me. My parents showed up on my porch and left the papers there. I didn't know what to think. Apparently, they also got jobs so that I wouldn't have to spend my money on them anymore. I returned the papers and haven't contacted them yet. As for my husband, well, he's my ex-husband now. Yes, I filed for divorce and had him sent to prison for fraud. With a double case against him, Thomas's chances of avoiding jail were slim. Just as I predicted, the judge put him in prison.